Thanks for this decision, and thanks to this decision, we can now promptly file to proceed with numerous policies that have been wrongly enjoined on a nationwide basis. And some of the cases we're talking about would be ending birthright citizenship, which now comes to the fore. That was meant for the babies of slaves. It wasn't meant for people trying to scam the system and come into the country on a vacation. This was, in fact, it was the same date, the exact same date, the end of the Civil War. It was meant for the babies of slaves, and it's so clean and so obvious. But this lets us go there and finally win that case, because hundreds of thousands of people are pouring into our country under birthright citizenship, and it wasn't meant for that reason. It was meant for the babies of slaves. So thanks to this decision, we can now promptly file to proceed with these numerous policies and those that have been wrongly enjoined on a nationwide basis, including birthright citizenship, ending sanctuary city funding, suspending refugee resettlement, freezing unnecessary funding, stopping federal taxpayers from paying for transgender surgeries, and numerous other priorities of the American people.
These are their bills. They have their names on the bills.
The world is watching California, and this is going to have a direct impact on your friend, Kamala Harris, who's running for president.
So this is Assemblyman Mr. Bryan. He's mad I brought up the reparations vote.
The California Legislative Black Caucus wanted to separate as much as possible the original bill, SB 1403, called the California American Freedmen Affairs Agency.
What do we want? What do we want? What do we want? What do we want?
Thank you for joining. This is Me and the Mass Media Group. Hope you are doing well on this wonderful 4th of July. Some people call it Independence Day. America is officially 250 years old. So we're going to be getting into some things, including the good ancestor, Frederick Douglass. We're also going to be talking about immigrants coming into the United States and the history of it and the timeline, and the birthright citizenship current Supreme Court case. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and hit that bell for notifications. We'll be right back after these brief messages. So if you're interested in some of the previous 4th of July or 4th of July presentations right here on the Mass Media Group, go ahead and leave a playlist link at your earliest convenience. But let's continue with the program. Welcome back. I'm going to start with the great ancestor once again, Frederick Douglass, in his speech in 1852 called "What to the Slave is the 4th of July." On July 5th, 1852, Frederick Douglass was invited to address the citizens of his hometown, Rochester, New York. Whatever the expectations of his audience on that 76th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence, Douglass used the occasion not to celebrate the nation's triumphs, but to remind all of its continuing enslavement of millions of people. So let's actually go to the crux of this speech. I'm not actually going to start from the beginning because it's actually a pretty lengthy speech. I'll probably actually read it one day right here on ETN Media Group and probably do a breakdown and analysis. But I do want to read part of the speech because I think this part of the speech is important and will definitely give us a good context of even the things that we are facing here in the United States from American freedmen, those who are descendants of American chattel slavery here in the United States. So let's actually continue a little bit farther down in the speech. All right, so just kind of summarize prior to the point of speech that we're going to be referring to. He basically talks about the history of America and how basically Americans were subjugated then to the British rule, and how that day was celebrated amongst the American citizens. So actually let's continue kind of right in the middle of the speech, because I think this is a very good point to start from. So here we go. Frederick Douglass says, "Fellow citizens, above your national tumultuous joy, I hear the mournful wail of millions whose chains, heavy and grievous yesterday, are today rendered more intolerable by the jubilee shouts that reach them. If I do forget, if I do not faithfully remember those bleeding children of sorrow this day, may my right hand forget her cunning, and may my tongue cleave to the roof of my mouth. To forget them, to pass lightly over their wrongs, and to chime in with the popular theme would be treason most scandalous and shocking, and would make me a reproach before God and the world. My subject, then, fellow citizens, is American slavery. I shall see this day and its popular characteristics from the slave's point of view, standing there identified with the American bondman, making his wrongs mine. I do not hesitate to declare with all my soul that the character and conduct of this nation never looked blacker to me than on this 4th of July. Whether we turn to the declarations of the past or to the professions of the present, the conduct of the nation seems equally hideous and revolting. America is false to the past, false to the present, and solemnly binds herself to be false to the future. And in the future, today we are, ladies and gentlemen. Standing with God and the crushed and bleeding slave on this occasion, I will, in the name of humanity which is outraged, in the name of liberty which is fettered, in the name of the Constitution and the Bible, which we are discarded and trampled upon, dare to call in question and to denounce with all the emphasis I can command everything that serves to perpetuate slavery, the great sin and shame of America. I will not equivocate. I will not excuse. I will not use the severest language I can command, and yet not one word shall escape me that any man whose judgment is not blinded by prejudice, or who is not a slaveholder, shall not confess to be fight and just. But I fancy I hear some one of my audience say, it is just in this circumstance that you and your brother abolitionists fail to make a favorable impression on the public mind. Would you argue more and denounce less? Would you persuade more and rebuke less? Your cause would be much more likely to succeed. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to stop there because, this speech is so profound. But I just kind of wanted us to start there so we can get a good understanding of what was happening at the time, especially from Frederick Douglass, who was a slave and escaped out of slavery to get his freedom. And what is so remarkable and so outstanding is his eloquent speech is amazing. This whole speech, there are no words to describe what kind of brave and courageous man this is to, on this day, on so-called Independence Day, call out the hypocrisy of the country. What a brave soul Frederick Douglass is and will always be. All right, so another reason why it was good to start with Frederick Douglass, because we have to think about the time when Frederick Douglass said his speech. And that's basically coming from enslavement, out of enslavement, and what happened. And as we go through these numbers, you'll see that the majority of people coming into the United States, and this was obviously done on purpose, were predominantly white Europeans. And that actually might be argued because these same people coming over may not even be classified as white, but that's a whole nother topic. But let's continue. Okay, so not only did I want to start there during that time, and once again, I think definitely we need to read the whole speech from Frederick Douglass, because it will definitely give a great context of what was happening at that time. But as we look in the numbers, you'll basically see we're going to go from 1965 or pre-1965 and then after 1965 to see what was happening in this country. So let's start with pre-1965. All right, so as you can see on this chart, you notice that the largest immigrant groups before 1965 were Germans, the Irish from Ireland, Italians, Italy, Austria, Russians from the United Kingdom, Scandinavia, some from Canada, and then you also have some of the immigrant groups, some Chinese and then some Japanese before 1965. So you can check those numbers out on the screen. Well, I guess for the seeing impaired family who are watching this, let me actually go through these numbers because I think it's important. So please forgive me. So let's continue actually with some of these numbers before 1965. Okay, Germany at 18.2%, that's 5.5 million, and that's from years 1880 to 1924. We have Ireland, 4.8 million at 15.9%. Italy, 4.5 million at 14.9%. Austria, Hungary, 4 million at 13.2%. Russia, 12.2% at 3.7 million. United Kingdom, 3 million at 9.9%. Scandinavia, 2 million at 6.6%. Canada, 2 million at 6.6%. China, 300,000 at 1%, and Japan at 200,000 at 0.7%. All right. So let's continue on to the largest immigration groups after 1965, and this is from 1965 approximately to 2023. Now, once again, these are all approximate numbers. Country or ethnic of origin is Mexico. Okay, approximate number of immigrants, 12.4 million. That's 27.6% of the share. That sits at the top. Number two, Indian or India, 6.2 million. That's 13.8%. China, 5.1 million at 11%. Philippines, 4 million at 8.9%. Vietnam, 2.2 million at 4.9%. Dominican Republic, 2.2 million at 4.9%. El Salvador, 1.4 million at 3.1%. Cuba, 1.3 million at 2.9%. South Korea, 1.2 million at 2.7%. And Guatemala at coming in at 10 at 1.1 million at 2.4%. All right, so some of the key comparisons before 1965, immigration was overwhelmingly from Europe and Canada, and after 1965, immigration is more globally diverse, with the largest share from Latin America and Asia. The 1965 Act eliminated national origins quotas and prioritized family reunification, and skilled immigration, leading to a dramatic shift in the countries of origin. So we know that Haitians in particular and some people recently coming over from the continent of Africa have been in the news. So I wanted to kind of do some numbers and some research on African immigrants to the United States prior to 1965 and then after. And then along with that, we're going to look at Haitian immigrants to the United States before and after 1965. So let's start on the left of the chart with the African immigrants coming to the United States before 1965. So as you can see on the chart, it says before 1965, we have all African countries combined. You're looking at approximately 150,000. If we go down the list, break that down by country, you have Egypt at 16.7%, around 25,000. Ethiopia at 20,000 at 13%. Morocco at 15,000 at 10%. Nigeria, including the Gold Coast, that's 10,000 at 6.7%. Liberia, 10,000 at 6.7%. South Africa at 9,000 at 6%. Algeria, 8,000 at 5.3%, and other African countries, 53,000 at 35%. All right, so after 1965, you have all African countries combined totaling of 4,550,000. So let's go down some of the numbers. So you have Nigeria, all right, at 915,000 at 20%. Ethiopia, 485,000 at 10.7%. Egypt, 405,000 at 8.9%. Ghana, 300,000 at 6.6%. Kenya, 250,000 at 5.5%. South Africa, 210,000 at 4.6%. Cameroon, 200,000 at 4.4%, totaling or other African countries at 1.7 million or 1,785,000 at 39.3%, once again totaling 4,550,000. So once again, family, please like, share, and subscribe. Hit that bell for notifications. And once again, for those who are able to see, I'm really doing this for our brothers and sisters who are sight impaired, and I guess maybe hearing impaired as well, but more particular. So thanks once again for your patience. Let's actually move on to the Haitian chart, okay? So before 1965, this is in periods 1790 through 1899. You have about 1,200 at 9.8%. From 1900 to 1919, you have about 18.7%, 2,300. 1920 to 1935, 4,000 at 32.5%. 1940 to 1959, you have 3,200 at 26%. And from 1960 to 1964, you have about 1,600 at 13%, which totals approximately 12,000-ish Haitian immigrants immigrating to the United States. And then after 1965 to 1974, you have about 6.2% of the share at 28,000. 90,000 at 20%. That's from 1975 to 1984. 1985 to 1994, you have about 229,000 at 50%. 1995 to 2004 at 63,000 at 4%. 2005 to 2014, 32,000 at 7.1%. In 2015 to 2023 at 8%, and that's 1.8% approximately share of the Haitian total, which totals between 1965 to 2023 450,000 Haitian immigrants coming to this country in the United States. So just to note, there was an increase of more than 30 times after 1965 for African immigrants coming to the United States. And then there was an increase of more than 36 times after 1965 for the Haitian immigrants. The Immigration and Nationality Act of 1965 eliminated national origins quotas and opened the door to greater diversity from Africa, the Caribbean, and around the world. So as you can see, not only did the 1965 Act, bring more people all across the world, but in particular, some of those other countries as well that are outside of the European continent. So as the racial wealth gap widens here in the United States, and as people migrated into this country, I wanted to actually show this chart here. All right, so we can compare the difference between those who came out of chattel enslavement here in America and those who then came to the United States, which is basically 1862, regarding the Homestead Act, and see how that actually impacted the American freedmen, or those who descend from the American freedmen community, and also those who came, in particularly from Europe, to this country, because it's often said, well, it's so long ago and this actually didn't happen to you in terms of reparations. So those who, like yourselves or us, who are currently in the United States after slavery shouldn't receive reparations. But ladies and gentlemen, we're actually talking about we are those people. So let's get that clear. All right, here we go. U.S. land policies, a tale of two promises, comparing land promised to freed people during Reconstruction versus land distributed under the Homestead Act. All right. So for those that don't know, I'm sure people who listen to this, and if you don't, and if you're new here, go ahead, like, share, and subscribe. But obviously those who are listeners and viewers of our content are very familiar with Special Field Orders number 15 by William T. Sherman. At the particular time, that's the 40 acres and a mule. So if you see on the left-hand side, we'll start with that chart. It says land reserved about 400,000 acres, and the beneficiaries would have been about 40,000 formerly enslaved people for temporary settlement. Unfortunately, most of the land was returned after President Andrew Johnson's orders to basically recall and renege on that promise of 40 acres and a mule. Versus the Homestead Act of 1862 through 1986, land was distributed about 270 million acres. Beneficiaries, about 1.6 million homestead patents were issued, and the outcome, land generally was retained by those successful homesteaders. So let's actually watch a clip from the great Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, where he actually talks about in one of his greatest speeches. So let's go see what he had to say, and then we will come back. All right, so let's move on to the birthright citizenship debate, the case, the scenario that's happening right here in the United States, in particular with the Supreme Court current ruling. Let's go ahead and watch a clip.
The Supreme Court has rejected President Donald Trump's executive order on birthright citizenship that would have denied citizenship to children born to mothers who are in the country illegally or temporarily. Trump signed an executive order on his first day in office last year that would have upended more than a century's understanding of what it means to be an American citizen. Birthright citizenship is enshrined in the 14th Amendment to the Constitution, which was adopted after the Civil War. President Trump has posted repeatedly on social media about the importance of limiting birthright citizenship, and in a sign of his interest in the case, attended arguments in April apparently the first time a sitting American president has attended Supreme Court arguments.
The court, in a 6-3 decision, ruled that Trump's Executive Order 14160, which would have denied citizenship to children born to parents who were in the United States unlawfully or temporarily, violated the 14th Amendment's citizenship clause. Chief Justice John Roberts wrote for the majority, joined by Justices Sonia Sotomayor, Elena Kagan, Ketanji Brown Jackson, and Amy Coney Barrett. Justices Brett Kavanaugh concurred in the judgment but dissented in part, arguing the order violated federal statute, the 1940 law, rather than Constitution, and suggested Congress could later legislate exceptions. Very interesting. We're going to get into that point later. Justices Clarence Thomas, Samuel Alito, and Neil Gorsuch wrote separate dissents, arguing that birth alone is not enough for citizenship and that the decision, quote, devalues, end quote, American citizenship. So according to Gerald L. Newman, who's the J. Sinclair Armstrong Professor of International Foreign and Comparative Law, said basically by trying to do this, meaning Donald Trump, by executive order, it's a violation of citizenship statutes as well, not just the Constitution. It's doubly unlawful. So as we know, and has been stated plenty times, as well as now President Donald Trump said the 14th Amendment was made for the babies of slaves. As he put it, those who descend from U.S. chattel slavery and those who are descendants of American freedmen. But the question is what it would take to amend the 14th Amendment. So here's an article by legalclarity.org. And it says what amending the Constitution requires. It says changing the 14th Amendment's citizenship clause requires navigating the amendment process in Article 5 of the Constitution, which was designed to be difficult. The process has two stages, proposal and ratification. Proposing an amendment, there are two ways to propose a constitutional amendment. The first and only method ever successfully used requires a 2/3 vote in both the House of Representatives and the Senate. An important detail, the Constitution requires 2/3 of members present and voting, not 2/3 of the total membership. When the full chamber votes, that translates to roughly 290 House votes and 67 Senate votes. But the actual threshold shifts depending on attendance. All right, so the article goes on ratifying an amendment. Once proposed, an amendment must be ratified by 3/4 of the states. Okay, so not just the House, but the states. Must be ratified by 3/4 of the states, currently 38 out of 50. Congress chooses between two ratification methods. The standard method sends the amendment to state legislatures for an up or down vote. The alternative method requires special state ratifying conventions, which has happened exactly once in American history. For the 21st Amendment repealing prohibition in 1933. The Constitution itself says nothing about time limits for ratification. For the 20th century, no proposed amendment included one. Starting with the 18th Amendment in 1917, Congress began attaching 7-year deadlines, and that practice has continued for every amendment proposed since. Whether Congress can extend or remove a deadline after the fact remains an open legal question, as the ongoing debate over the Equal Rights Amendment illustrates. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. That will conclude the program today. But before we go, what we must understand is the United States is currently in a conundrum. Something like the same conundrum that the United States was at back in 1776. The same topic that was discussed in terms of those who were enslaved in the United States in 1776, 250 years ago, also in 1865, as well as in 1965, as well as in 2026. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, we're talking about those individuals who built this country for free. Ladies and gentlemen, we're not only talking about birthright citizenship, who it was meant for those coming out of enslavement, but more in particular, reparations are owed, because the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment were for those individuals emancipated from the chains of enslavement and oppression in this country. And those descendants are still dealing with those grievances. It's not like it's gone away, and it's not like it's going to go away. So whatever you do on this day, on the 4th of July, 4th of July, or Independence Day as some people would say it, be thankful, be humble, and definitely have gratitude. But just always remember that the United States would be nothing without the American freedmen. On that note, ladies and gentlemen, as always, you take care of yourself, your friends, and your family. We'll see you next time right here on Amen the Mass Media Group. Peace and reparations.